Wokes on air, Wokes on air, Wokes on air. You are listening to the vibes of Chidubem Okechukwu and Akim-Maria. Welcome to listeners, and thank you for joining us in this week's Wokes on air episode, which we're going to be talking about citizenry. Last week we talked about national identity, and we came to a fair few conclusions. Wokes, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Chidubem. So in the sense of what we came to as a conclusion last weekend, we talked about national identity. Is there anything you just want to recap on that, or move forward straight into citizenry, which is this week's discussion?
Yeah, I think we covered what we really need to cover with regards to Nigerian identity and national identity. I believe we spoke specifically about Nigerian identity, actually, but not necessarily to the broad spectrum of national identity.
Yes,
but it all interlinks, so it's close. It does, yeah. I don't really have anything else to say. No, I think in general we've covered like very basics and deeper explanations of it as well. So, but yeah, our identity is what makes us the way we act. We agreed on that. Our point.
I'm sure our listeners from last week will remember that you're in Nigeria at the moment. What's the weather like there?
It's very hot and humid, but it's actually like it's a good balance. So there's heat, there's also some sort of air circulation. So
cool.
It's great.
What has your adventure
in very interesting weather.
What has your adventure in Nigeria been like so far? In the sense of where have you been specifically, and where will you end up eventually?
Where have I? Yes, I went straight first to the capital, then I left the state FCT. Went to FCT first, Abuja. Then went to Imo State. Then from Imo State, I'm now in Lagos. Okay. So yeah, you have it. That's where I am.
Nice,
right now.
Nice. Yeah. With regards to this week's discussion, Wokes, what's going on there?
Citizenry for me means, the general attitudes that a group of people who belong to a country have towards the country and how it influences the way they behave. That's my definition of citizenry.
The attitudes. What do you mean by attitudes?
I'll say the attitudes in terms of the ways that they feel about their country as citizens, specifically as citizens. The way they value the rules that bound their country together, the history of the country, the political economy of the country, the leadership of the country, etc. Ways in which they respond to these things form their attitudes as a general populace towards the nation, towards the country. That's what I define as citizenry. The process through which the general character of that identity as a citizen within a country is why I class as citizenry.
Interesting. That's a lot of items to discuss, obviously, with citizenry.
Deconstruct,
yeah. Interesting. Citizenry, in the definition I saw on Google, as you guys know, I do enjoy my Google. And the citizenry is basically the citizens of a place regarded collectively. In a sense, it's very interlinked with Nigerian identity, national identity, which we discussed last week. That collective idea, that collective perception of Nigeria. And as you described, the attitude, Wokes, the sensation and the desires, that Nigerians experience in Nigeria.
Definitely.
It's a very interesting topic because it's going to be a very subjective and personal experience for each and every citizen. However, I think what we need to approach here is more along the lines of a standard of what citizens should experience. As a Nigerian citizen, what is the sensation you experience? Where do you feel pride about certain things, and what are the things you should make sure that are never disregarded in your presence? Do you have any of those topics you think Nigerian citizens as a collective should value?
Topics that they should value, like from the last things you said, or in general?
Generally, like you mentioned, what is the attitude? What are their values? What are their feelings towards Nigeria? Is there any collective idea Nigerians should feel towards Nigeria and towards one another as citizens of this country?
That Nigerians should feel a sense of pride as citizens of a country that has, fought through a lot of things, had a lot of experiences, gone through a lot of travels and sufferings.
Mm.
and come out on the other side, somewhat smelling like roses.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Nigerians should also have a sense of unity.
Mm-hmm.
So with pride comes the pride in the unity of a group of people. So I think the unity that they share as being part of one country should definitely influence their pride. But I think pride should first come from the unity, the sense of unity and wanting to be together, wanting to be within a certain framework and to work within that understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that Nigerians should be confident. I think Nigerians should root for each other. I think that it's very important that they root for each other, because if they do not root for each other, then the country doesn't stand as firm as it can be. I think that dividedness is something that we do not want. And as I've said before, unity, the pride that comes with that, and generally the whole sticking together and rooting for each other. I think those three are a very cataclysmic combination. Three very important things. Yeah.
So sticking together, unity especially, and that's basically in our coat of arms. Fundamentally speaking, as Nigerian, one of the things that we learn early in life is the national anthem, the pledge, and what it says on the coat of arms: unity, peace, faith, and progress. I think is what it's on there. For me, my personal experience, you know, just to cite what a friend of mine says, he's I would say a successful entrepreneur in Nigeria on a very small scale. He opened up a corner shop restaurant recently, and today I was watching a live video on Facebook that he was posting, and in it he said, "It doesn't matter whether the country is suffering, we have to still enjoy." I think that's the mentality of a lot of Nigerians. Um, why I cited this, and to connect it with the coat of arms is that, we're united in our idea that regardless of whatever hardships we're going through, we have to look at it on a positive note, and in terms
Yes,
of
definitely. Yeah.
in terms of being problem solvers ourselves, we also need to remember that tomorrow will come, and we need to make sure that
Yeah.
regardless of whatever hardships we're going through today, we have those solutions ready to at least minimize the chances that we experience those things in the future. Um, as a collective, I kind of tend to see that we have that enjoyment mentality down, but with regards to considering what's going on tomorrow, there is that situation of where we need to do a little bit of work there. I'm guilty of that myself. Procrastination was one of those things that
we live in the moment. We definitely live in the moment.
Exactly. Procrastination is one of those.
We live in the moment sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think living in the moment is actually a Zen idea, because at least you're present and aware of what's going on at that point in time. But one has to bear in mind what's going on tomorrow. One of the things I just wanted to point out was I was very guilty of procrastinating when I grew up. But when I was growing up, one of the things I realized more recently was that procrastination is basically saying that I want to fail today. Because there's a task that you can actually do today, but you're putting it off till another day. And therefore, you're saying that I decide that today I will not pass this thing because I'm putting it off till tomorrow. It's not that I have anything more important to do today. It's just that the idea of me facing that issue, facing that problem, is um, is causing a reaction in me that I feel like pushing it to the next day, and that's definitely how I also view generally what we're facing as a collective in Nigeria when it comes to our potential. We're pushing our potential onto a later date. We're pushing what needs to get fixed onto a later date. And I think we need to kind of retune our values in that sense and come together as a collective to solve this problem. We need to value that we need to be collective problem solvers and get the job done. Hopefully we can arrive at that conclusion. However, with what we've been through in recent years, I wouldn't necessarily use that as evidence to say that tomorrow we're going to change it in the flash. That's basically what I feel about just that fundamental citizenry aspect.
Yes, folks, I agree with you. I think that definitely our inability sometimes to look towards the future and to think about the things that are important in the future and how they would influence our actions in the present is something that continues to remove us from the full state of success that we could get to as a country. And I think our citizens individually are guilty of that, because the citizens make up the country. C for C, as I would like to say, citizens for country. And I think that more importantly than anything is the fact that we are able to enjoy our current state sometimes. Like sometimes we're able to appreciate our circumstances. It's something that's a very key component of the Nigerian character. The ability to be happy in the present, even when the future doesn't seem bright. But then the issue with that sometimes is getting too complacent with the idea of the present circumstance kind of detracts you from fighting to make that a reality in the future, if that makes any sense. So you have to make sure that you're also looking to the future and how to better it, and not just being complacent in your current circumstance in the present. So I think those two things, they come in different ways, and sometimes it's really bad having that as a combination. But I think the latter, looking to the future and making the sacrifices that need to be made in the present to better the future, that's one thing that we need to do. That's a key part of our citizenry that I would like to see, that I don't always see. I see more of the former, which is just being complacent and being happy and content in mediocrity.
Interesting.
What do you think?
I have a very clear understanding of what you're saying, and I just wanted to use this opportunity to basically question what we've been experiencing as citizens in the past, citizens in the present, and citizens in the future. The overall aim of this podcast is to ensure that we talk about Nigeria in topics that are hardly discussed on regular basis, so that we can actually shed new ideas, maybe some insights into areas where people are looking into, and perhaps we can also go forward and help solve these problems as well. But the point I'm making here is that perhaps looking at our past, looking at our present, and the future as citizens could help us understand clearer what Nigeria needs from us to go forward. One of the examples that we looked at in the past, or if you wouldn't mind me starting off by saying, with Nigerian citizens in the past, we were subjected to, various types of government in the sense of military rule, and then I think the Republican rule as well, which is a little bit separate from democracy. Basically, we've had various forms of government, and Nigerians haven't really been able to adapt to one in particular. We've always been kind of shifted to and threatened with various types of government, or governments being reinstated, in terms of democracy being a fairly more recent and longer experience state of government.
And not always an accepted experience as well in our country, actually.
Yeah.
Democracy has not always worked. We still struggle with democracy.
With the idea of democracy, it's true.
We do, yeah.
It's true. I think it's democracy with a splash of Nigerian sauce on it. Ladies and gentlemen, please pardon this brief interruption to allow me to say for the record that Nigeria is actually a republic. Please continue to love and listen to the rest of the podcast. Thank you. In terms of we're interpreting it for ourselves to fit into the way Nigerian should I say communities and traditions are already established to be, rather than those communities and traditions fitting into the idea of democracy. I think that's where we struggle with that. However, the point I wanted to make was that Nigerian citizens in the past haven't yet had a chance to experience a steady and flowing movement of government to really commit to it. And I think maybe a few people were frustrated by this. So you would see those ideas of commitment and loyalty kind of being weakened by the lack of a consistent government. And as a result, people got frustrated by that. And this idea is still present in the present citizen of Nigeria. Although the present citizen of Nigeria has woken up to say, okay, let's do something about this. But we're not necessarily equipped in terms of our institutions, those resources available to us to fix what's in our community, because of the previous state of what previous citizens were experiencing. The present citizens are not really equipped to actually push things into action, even though they have that will right now. That action that's required doesn't have the tools necessary to see the results that we're all looking for. And I wanted to draw an example of Mr. Joseph Blankson from last week, who had the will to save those people, and he used his own resources, which most present Nigerians use to try and do something in Nigeria. However, that collective idea of all putting in together is kind of not necessarily um, applied. Looking at it and saying, okay, guys, let's all do this together and try and save this group of people. It amazing what Mr. Blankson did, and I don't know what would have happened if Nigeria was in a different state. But I'm just drawing on his example in the point that he tried to use his own resources, and he did so heroically, saving 13 people. And that's what you find most Nigerians doing these days, trying to use their own resources to save a lot of people. And only God will determine their fate. However, if we all pull together and try in the present to try and save people, get the idea of collectivity going, then the citizen of the future will definitely have a better platform to solve problems and engage in a global platform better than we have today. And I think if we can understand this idea and actually commit to it and let go of the frustrations that we feel, I think Nigeria has a chance. I definitely think Nigeria has a chance. Will it definitely succeed? Nothing in the world is perfect. So the citizen of the future is what we should be thinking about. Think about how we can support their own ideas, support their own discoveries, support their own efforts to make Nigeria great. Because if we're living in the moment, as we already established, and we know this, and we don't do anything about it, are we really responsible citizens, Nwokes?
No, we aren't.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be. We aren't in that situation.
Yeah. I want to be a responsible citizen, Nwokes, and I'm sure you do too. Testify.
Yes.
Exactly. Well said, Nwokes. Well said. Listen. Anything else you want to add to that, Nwokes?
Not much, Nwokes. I was going to say that in addition to being citizens of the future, we can also be citizens of the globe. How about that?
That's true.
About, the idea of belonging to the world and looking for the welfare of all countries, not just your country.
Yes, exactly.
Someday we'll get to that level of complexity.
Exactly. And I believe that's what the world is setting up for at this point. Everybody is setting up to be interdependent. If you're not setting yourself up to be interdependent, those that are setting themselves up to be interdependent will leverage the position that you're in for themselves. They would use that to their own advantage. And because you haven't developed that interdependent infrastructure necessary, they're going to outcompete you every single time. And what we know about reality is that it's constantly changing. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I think that's the quote. So the more
definitely. I think that we need to become citizens of the globe, and I think that we also need to become citizens that are aware of every other thing in the world, not just ours. So you need to. I know our issues sometimes be overwhelming to the point that focus mainly on them as each country feels about their country.
Yes.
But a good country is a country that realizes that it doesn't exist on an island as an island, and that it needs to actually interact with people from other countries as well.
Agreed.
To get to that full potential that it requires and it looks towards, definitely, yes.
100%. I definitely agree with that. I agree with that. It's reality. 1 + 1 is always 2, right? Unless you get into that is it quantum level of things.
Yeah, or unless which just means redefining your method of addition this time. Not really getting to a different answer per se.
Exactly.
Redefining your system of calculation. I think we need to redefine our systems in many ways to be better citizens.
Reality is incredible. I think also, after discussing that collective spirit, what are those things that can help us? What are those platforms and infrastructures that can help us to compete on the globe? And I think this is a good point to mention a topic for next week, which are the institutions of Nigeria, that collective of ideas and ability to directed to a problem with the intention of solving it.
Yeah.
So
I definitely think that the institutions also influence the attitude of citizens and the success of the country. So I think keeping that in mind as well would help to better the process of becoming better citizens and getting to that ideal sense of citizenry that we look forward to. That's what I think, Nwokes. I hope you feel the same.
I feel the same, Nwokes. Ideal citizenry, where we have collective values and we can apply them to the country we love, Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. You've been listening to yours truly, Chidubem Okechukwu and Akim-Maria. And if you like, click the like button. And if you loved it, subscribe.
And even if you just love it, even if you just like it, subscribe because you might love it next time.
That's what's up. It's a goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me as well, Nwokes.
Alrighty, till next week. Till next week, citizens of Nigeria, the vision will be complete.
The vision shall be complete.
Bye.